Our goal for the rest of the morning is to reveal the power of imagination through a journey of your accomplishments across America. We'll explore your visions, some of our technology, and learn about the art of the possible. Our first stop is in the Rocky Mountains and a visit with the National Park Service. Many of us enjoy visiting the national parks for the serenity and the beauty. It's also interesting to understand the growing challenges of distributed and sometimes remote park rangers, GIS professionals, and citizen volunteers. So please welcome from the National Park Service, Darcee Killpack and Heidi Ogle.
Thank you, John. The National Park Service has used desktop GIS for decades. As geospatial technology evolves, and as we celebrate our 100-year anniversary this August, the Intermountain Region GIS Division is modernizing the way we combine traditional desktop GIS with web GIS. Today, we'll share two different stories that demonstrate how adding web GIS to our workflows engages both our park staff and our community partners by leveraging their local knowledge. The Park Service has a large database of visitor use data, all the things you as a visitor want to see on a map: roads, trails, campgrounds, and of course, restrooms. As part of our centennial focus, we need to modernize the way we update and maintain this data so that we can have dynamic maps that supplement the printed maps you receive when you visit a park. This effort is called Park Places. Here's our challenge. The Intermountain Region has 84 park units distributed over 8 states. Larger parks, like Yellowstone and Grand Canyon, have full-time GIS staff to support data management. But most medium or small-sized parks, like Coronado or Chamizal National Memorial, have only part-time or no GIS staff. The people who know the parks the best are the people who work there: rangers, interpreters, and maintenance staff. So it makes sense to have them manage this data. However, very few of them have GIS training. We needed a solution that provided tools for all skill levels, overcomes slow bandwidth connections in some of our very remote parks, and simplifies data management. To showcase the Park Places workflow, let's go to one of my favorite parks in southern Utah, Bryce Canyon National Park. Kevin, a park ranger at Bryce, spends most of his days interacting with visitors at the iconic amphitheater. He knows the roads, the trails, and the visitor services for this area very well. However, he is not a desktop GIS user. So we modernized our approach by combining desktop and web GIS, and now users like Kevin can update this data directly. Our first step was to publish the data as a feature service in ArcGIS Online. We then added the published data to a web map, enabled editing, and shared it with Kevin. In the web map, Kevin zooms to the Sunset Point Overlook and notices that a restroom icon is missing from the map. Though editing GIS data is not a part of Kevin's duties, this simple web map empowers him to update this information. With little burden on him, we can now benefit from his local knowledge. Experienced GIS staff also have the option to edit the same feature service in a desktop GIS environment, such as ArcGIS Pro. For example, Jim, a geologist and part-time GIS employee at the park, can bring in the same feature service, review the data, and make additional changes as needed. When Jim zooms to the amphitheater, he will first see Kevin's edits. He then notices that one of the trails is incorrectly symbolized for public display. Jim knows this trail is a social trail. Social trails form when people have taken shortcuts off the traditional and official network of the park. The park is restoring vegetation in these areas, so we want to discourage people from using these types of trails. Jim will flag this trail as NPS only in our database, so it doesn't appear on our public maps. Now that Jim and Kevin have completed their edits, back at the regional office in Denver, Heidi can download the data and run some quality checks. We can use the Data Reviewer extension to expedite this review. this process by verifying attribute information and spatial locations. Heidi can run the validation and review any errors, and then she can make any corrections and mark them as resolved. Automating this review process will save us time as we go from initial review phase to maintenance of this data. For the Park Places project, we offer a solution where each user chooses the best tool that matches their skills while all working with one feature service. We found that when given the choice of editing visitor data in a desktop or a web map, many of our parks chose the web map. This proves the need for a simple, web-based option alongside the desktop capabilities. And now our second example of modernization to a web GIS focuses on how we engage local communities to help preserve an important part of our national heritage, National Historic Trails. Oregon, California, and the Pony Express are just a few examples of these trails. Many of the locations and much of the evidence of these trails has been lost due to development and neglect. The Intermountain Region Trails Office has been working to commemorate and preserve this heritage. How do we do that? By putting up signs, like this one. These signs designate the original route of a historic trail and locations where the trail crosses roads. These signs are an important landmark and educate the public about the trails and their place in history. You may also ask, how do we know where to put these important signs? We engage the people who know the trails the best, individuals whose passion for the history of the trails drives them to tell its story. We are using WebGIS to create a collaborative platform where volunteers can interact with the map and inventory existing signs and suggest locations for new ones. One particular project connects members of the Oregon-California Trails and the National Pony Express Trail Associations with the California Department of Transportation. Association members were asked to locate and map suggested sign locations using this simple web map. Since the fall of 2015, just 10 volunteers covering 23 counties in Northern California have proposed over 800 signs. One volunteer in particular has studied the California Trail for nearly 40 years. Frank Totorich has written 3 books about sections of the trail that go through the El Dorado National Forest. Nobody knows the California Trail like Frank does. Let's take a look at some of the signs he has suggested for the Carson Pass and Hope Valley areas. The Carson Pass route was discovered by Mormons heading back to Utah from California in 1848. After hearing about the tragedy of the Donner Party in 1847, they really wanted to find a new way back home. The Carson Pass section of the trail was also heavily used during the California Gold Rush. Another area Frank has been concentrating on is Caples Lake. We see a section of the trail is now covered by this man-made lake, one of the many developments now obscuring the trail's location. But in 2008, the lake was drained for repairs, and association volunteers were able to locate the original trail. The volunteers found a gravesite, half of an ox shoe, and other artifacts documenting the trail's location. We see that a crossing sign has been designated for the east end of the lake. So let's suggest another crossing sign be placed on the other side. This simple web map provides the community a powerful way to engage in the sign planning process. Using their local knowledge, each volunteer is able to directly support the preservation of these historic trails. When volunteers suggest signs for a segment of the trail, NPS analyzes the locations and the types of signs suggested. We then download the data and process it into a comprehensive sign plan. The report includes the final proposed locations of each sign in a mapbook format, a table that summarizes the sign types by county and road jurisdiction, including nearest road and direction of the sign, and finally, a table of costs of the signs summarized by map area and jurisdiction. These reports have been instrumental in getting the state and local officials to approve funding for the installation of these signs. Once the report is approved, it can serve as a guide to the crews installing signs. This collaborative effort with local communities has increased the visibility of our National Historic Trails, enabling the American public to find, follow, experience, and enjoy our national heritage. The success of these two projects shows us the importance of modernizing our web flows by incorporating WebGIS. This approach extends our reach to NPS staff in the field and to our partners in the community. As we continue our mission of protecting and preserving our natural and cultural heritage, the sign is clearly visible. WebGIS is moving us forward.